Sometimes we don't realize the blocks we have with intimacy until we meet someone who's ready to give us the intimacy we crave and see how we respond to it. What's up, everybody? I'm Mystic Brew, your favorite Lebanese mystic and astrologer, and this is Shadows of the Heart. As a certified coach, intuitive, and former dating columnist who's also had her own situationships with dating, I know all too well how our shadows love to come out to play when it comes to dating and relationships. In this series, I'm meeting with various singles who are ready to get to the root of what's going on behind the scenes that keeps them attracting the same type of partner and relationships with love. By using astrology, I look at each person's birth chart to see the shadows that are lurking within their cosmic blueprint. And with that information, we get down to the root of what wounds or blind spots are coming up for their awareness so that they can break the karmic cycle and choose differently. In this episode, you're going to meet Colleen, a double Aquarius, sun and moon. And I've been attracting a lot of Aquarius energy with this series. I don't know if you've been noticing that as well. So you may see some things that are reminiscent of some other episodes, especially when it comes to control, vulnerability, and intimacy. But before I say too much, let's meet Colleen and see the shadows in her chart. Hey, Colleen, welcome to Shadows of the Heart. I'm so excited to read your chart with you today. With that said, I do want to check in and see how comfortable you are with astrology, just so I know how to explain things in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, so I feel like I'm pretty well versed in astrology. I've done some more basic readings for people and with people, but when I've been read myself, sometimes I'm just learning like a little bit around the peripheral of what I knew previously. But I'm really excited to dig into this topic specifically. I feel like I always have blind spots, so
We all
I'm
do.
good with the lingo, but I'm excited to learn.
Yeah, awesome. All right, great. So, as you know, because we've done card readings together in the past, the
Mhm.
same goes with astrology. This is our first time looking at your chart together. Use your discernment, please. Just because I'm saying it doesn't mean it's automatic truth. See how it resonates with you in your body. I'm going to be using my foundational knowledge of astrology as well as my intuitive insight to see what comes up for me in your chart, specific to some of the dating patterns that you shared when I initially reached out to casting, which we will go over as well, and just really trust your guidance. At the same time, one, I'm not afraid of the word no. So if it doesn't resonate, don't feel like, oh my gosh, I can't tell her, tell me, because this is for you and I can't help you if I don't know whether or not something resonates with you. The
Yeah.
other thing is if there is a memory, an experience, or something that comes up for you while we're talking about an aspect or a placement, and of course you feel inclined to share, you don't have to share anything you don't want to share. Don't be afraid to interrupt me and just jump in. I feel like when that happens, there's a reason for that. And so there may be something that's coming up for you specifically that we're meant to sort of dive deeper into the chart.
Okay.
Sound good?
Perfect. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, well, let's get started. So I have your chart pulled up here. So you may already know that you are in Aquarius sun and moon and a Virgo rising. Just looking at your chart, you have a lot of energy on the bottom half of your chart. So that tells me that you kind of like to be on your own for a little bit, like you may be a little more private. You need that time to recharge, to kind of go into your own world, may have some hermit mode tendencies in that way. When it comes to your modalities, which is how this energy manifests, you have a lot of mutable energy. So what
Mm.
that means is a lot of the energy in your chart is quick to adapt. Like you're really good with like change. If change is happening, you're kind of ready to navigate. I know we already talked about some changes that are happening in your life prior to this call. So you are someone who's well equipped to pivot when you need to pivot, Now, again, that serves a great purpose when necessary. However, in other instances, can sometimes create this feeling of safety that's connected to constant change, that when there's something that's fixed and ongoing, that can almost seem a little threatening.
Yeah.
Now, something I wanted to touch on is your Capricorn Venus. So, your Venus is in Capricorn. Don't know if you know that. It's in your fourth house and it is squaring, which is the red line that goes into your Saturn in
Mm,
Aries in the seventh house. So, some
okay.
things here. Capricorn Venus. So, Venus for a woman represents your pleasures and joys in the world. It represents your femininity, it represents your values. With your Venus in Capricorn, there is something really important to you when it comes to commitment, consistency, building something of value. You're someone who understands what it takes to build over time. You're not afraid of hard work, even if it comes to relationships.
Mhm.
Now, with that squaring, which squares are sometimes friction or tension, not a bad thing, just information. That tension can also really give you an opportunity to strengthen something that other people wouldn't even have to navigate or maneuver or learn because it comes easy for them. So, the way I see squares and oppositions or other tense aspects is a gift and opportunity for you to learn something that other people never even have to learn, but that gives you tools. Now, Saturn in Aries, side note, you're about to go through your Saturn return.
Yeah. I I'm like just starting to feel it, and I turned 27 in January, at the end of January.
Yeah.
But I know it like hasn't really started rolling yet, and it's already feeling a little spicy. So,
Yeah, Saturn's a bit intense. Saturn's my chart ruler, so I get it. It's a very pivotal time. Almost, I see it like a rite of passage, an initiation that happens because Saturn is the disciplinarian, very karmic, very mature, very like, okay, it's time to grow up. You're going to learn some difficult lessons, but again, all for your benefit and all to align you with the path that is best for you. So there are sometimes really big shifts that happen during our Saturn return. You mentioned to me prior to this call that you're in the midst of a move. So that's one aspect of that, and really showing you where there may be some old mindsets, old patterns, old behaviors that are rooted in a version of yourself that's kind of ready to be released so that
yeah.
you can embody this. Now, with your Capricorn Venus squaring your Aries Saturn in the seventh house of committed partnership. This can look like restriction when it comes to love, specifically emotional restriction, because Capricorn's biggest fear is emotional vulnerability. And
Mm,
so when it is creating that tense aspect with your Saturn, which is also some rigidity energy, it can look like a deep fear of vulnerability when it comes to committed partnership for you. And with
mm,
that Aries energy, Aries loves that independence. It's not a sign that likes to be tied down necessarily. It likes to venture and carve a path of its own. And so sometimes, again, unconsciously,
mm.
that depth of commitment and consistency can feel like, ooh, I'm losing a part of myself.
Yeah.
And so,
I feel like when someone else comes with that kind of energy, I feel distrustful of it, or like, what are they trying to get out of me is sort of like what comes up for me.
mhm,
And I
like
feel
a
like manipulated in some way. But
transactional.
on, yeah, like if someone's really showing up for me, it's sad, but like my thought is like, what are they trying to like angle me towards? Like, what response do they want out of me? And then I can be very like sort of like, I don't know if this is anywhere in my chart, but I can be sort of like Piscean romantic in the way of like wanting to merge with someone and like know everything about them and open up every part of myself. But when I do that is when it's like very clearly someone who doesn't have the staying power or like emotional maturity to be in that space long term.
Yeah, it's definitely in your chart. We're going to talk about it. There is Piscean energy and even some Scorpio energy that lends to that. My belief, and this is my truth, not necessarily universal truth, but I really do believe and have experienced in my own journey that the partners we attract are teachers in some way for us. And sometimes it's really hard because, again, the shadow is lurking in the background. And even like in real life with your actual shadow on the ground, the second you turn to look at it, it moves back, you know? So it's really hard to face it. That's why when we connect with certain people, they help us see the things that are just outside of our view. And so, even with your Capricorn Venus squaring your Saturn in Aries, you have your Venus in Capricorn who's like, yes, stability, loyalty, structure, love that. And this may be something that you even experienced in the home in some way because it's in your fourth house of home. So, whether that was something that was instilled in your upbringing or something that was lacking in your upbringing that you were like, dang, I wish I had a little bit more of that to feel safer, it's important to you with your Venus placement. But the issue with that is, even though it values long term investment requires that emotional investment as well. And that's where things can get a little dicey because it's like, oh, you're touching something that I don't feel safe necessarily sharing openly yet.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, you got your Venus doing that. And then your Saturn in Aries is over here like independence, me, being assertive. And
Yeah.
that can sometimes struggle with the impulsivity, which can get in the way of that long-standing commitment. And also some bits of emotional repression with that too, because again, there is a fear on both ends of what feels like losing yourself. And
Yeah.
perhaps that's something that you've experienced in other situations, whether it was with parents, with friendships, with other lovers, with other situations where it was like a part of you was sacrificed in order to maintain a relationship. And you were like, never, never again.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I could like get emotional right now. Like you like
Yeah.
they struck a chord with that. I feel like when I've felt like most loved, I've often felt like I need to make myself small or like be a certain person for whoever it is that's loving me. And I do lose that piece of myself that can just like explore and find my true essence. Um, yeah, so then on the flip side, it does feel a lot safer to have someone who's like almost stable because then my intuition's very strong. My intuition knows that it's not going to work long term. So it feels so comfortable to be like, okay, this will hurt my feelings at most, but it's not going to take away my sense of self.
Mm, yeah. So it's kind of almost reflecting that emotional unavailability within yourself
Mm.
because the fear of, okay, well, I like this right now. It's given me something, and a part of me knows there is an end date here. This isn't going to go long term, which then again satiates that need for independence and not having to commit or invest too much of your emotional vulnerability or parts
Yeah,
of yourself. And even
yeah.
what you shared, which I appreciate you sharing that, it's so relatable of sometimes unconsciously trying to control things in that way. And again, reminding people, this is something I remind people a lot when we talk about the shadow. That
Mhm.
control is coming from a place of really seeking safety.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
it's not like, oh, I'm out to get you and I just really don't want you to ever be happy. It's like, no, this is what you learned over time, given
yeah.
your experiences. In order to feel safe, this and this needs to happen. And even with that Saturn and Aries energy, that's part of it. It's teaching you, Saturn, which is also authority, And same with Aries, like really that self-assertiveness and owning who you are. It's teaching you how to stand on your own and be your own authority, even in committed partnership. But again, it's a balance.
Yeah.
That's why there is that every sign has a sister sign, and for Aries, it's Libra. And Libra is the one about harmony, partnership, balance. Meanwhile, Aries is very much self, me, assert yourself. Don't be afraid to speak up, to voice your truth. And so,
Yeah.
again, finding that balance.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the Aries part of me has been suppressed in certain ways. Um,
Yeah.
and it's funny because I mean, I do have trauma related to like men specifically, but I don't really have like independence trauma related to men specifically. But I feel like it does really rear its head specifically when I'm dating men in terms of like if they want something very committed with me, I feel like there's something deceptive that I'm not seeing.
Because that's been your experience.
I don't even think it's been my experience. I don't have too much dating experience in general. Um, and when I do, I don't necessarily think I haven't been like bold-faced lied to or cheated on, but I'm just like convinced that this person is not gonna do what they say. I don't know. Being a very Aquarius Capricorn heavy person myself, I think I know what loyalty and commitment and love as an action looks like to me.
Mhm.
And I just don't necessarily trust that anyone could meet that standard.
Mm. Well, when I see Saturn in the birth chart, I think of the father. It
Hmm.
it shows me a little bit of how you were fathered and perhaps your relationship with your father, obviously depending on your upbringing and we don't have to go there if you don't feel comfortable, but I am curious if dad sort of played a role in you kind of having to maintain a sort of distance or wall when it comes to that vulnerability.
Hmm. Um, I mean, my dad was very present. Like, he was my softball coach my whole life. So we
Hmm.
always, like, really connected in that way, in like a fun, personable way. I would say he's very loving and he's also simultaneously not the most emotionally available person himself, I guess. Like he's always been there to support me positively. And of course, he's there in negative times too, but I think to a certain extent with both of my parents, I had a little bit more like perspective on what was happening emotionally, and they can both sort of turn into like an inner child version of themselves in those tough
Mm.
moments. And
Yeah.
then as the oldest daughter, like I'm the one who gets everyone squared away emotionally and otherwise.
Yeah, well, that and all the Saturn influence in your chart. I always tell people when Saturn is very prominent in your chart, it can feel like the Benjamin Button syndrome, where like you came out of the womb old and you just feel responsible for everybody. And then over time, that's when things sort of start to ease up on you a little bit because it does, it creates a lot of pressure and it self-inflicts sometimes these roles that you were never meant to take on that become attached to you.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, did something happen around 15 that caused you to either mature quickly or affect?
I think so. I can think of a couple things. Around my like every 7 years Saturn, I actually had a childhood best friend who I was friends with her since I was like 6 months old.
Mm.
But as we got older, specifically around that like middle school time, I guess on her end, there was like jealousy and resentment coming up, and she started to be somewhat physically abusive at that point.
Mm,
It was kind of a confusing situation because I've always been super tall for my age, and this best friend of mine was like pint-sized, five 5 foot, 5'1", and I've always been like 5'7", 5'8" since I was 12 years old. So even when she was like hitting me or whatever she was doing physically, it just wasn't taken that seriously. And because I grew up with her and because my parents are very committed and I've seen them be super loyal to
mm,
each other and their loved ones, I think it didn't occur to me until a lot later on that especially if someone's not blood family, you don't need to keep them in their life in your life if they're hurting you.
yeah.
Um, and I continued to be friends with her until I was about 20, 21, and then it like really escalated again. And at that point, we went our separate ways, but it took like a heavy dose of trauma for me to realize that the friendship wasn't gonna be forever. Um,
You know what's
yeah.
coming up for me while you're sharing that too is that perhaps part of the fear that you feel in fully opening up and investing in a relationship that deeply is because you know how committed you can be when you are committed. It feels like you almost don't trust yourself to leave if necessary.
Hmm.
And so, because you have taken on abuse in different ways, or perhaps, and again, I don't know, you tell me, but perhaps taken or accepted rather behavior that you knew wasn't okay, but there is like such, and this is very Capricorn Aquarius energy of very like, no, but I'm loyal, I'm committed, almost to a detriment, like to the point where now you're sacrificing your own dignity, respect, needs, wants, and
Yeah.
whatever else. And so it's almost like, man, I've stayed in situations and made excuses for behavior that I'm afraid if I allow myself to love someone this deeply or become that invested, I think that's the part that you're afraid of losing yourself in.
Yeah. I definitely think there's some of that. I also think like this in some ways, okay, let me get my thoughts out straight.
Hmm.
I am interested in dating men and women. In this relationship, it was purely platonic. Like I knew this girl since we were babies, but I loved her. Like this was a
Yeah,
soulmate. Like I thought she was gonna be like the godmother of my children kind of thing. So I feel like part of it is that I'm afraid to go there again and lose myself. And part of it is also that being that I never had any competition in my mind towards her and I didn't even see that that's where she was at until way too late. I feel like I have a fear that anyone who loves me deeply could come to resent me over time and like I
mm,
won't notice that a part of them hates me or wants to hurt me until
mm,
it's too late. And I do feel like it relates to my Saturn return, Saturn stuff too, because I'm someone who is really comfortable being open and being seen, but that's caused me a lot of harm in the past by the people who weren't so comfortable with me
right.
being
Which is
open and
not your fault.
yeah.
That's the other thing that's sometimes hard to accept is sometimes our energy and just being ourselves can rub people the wrong way, even if we're not doing anything. And going back to the control, needing control to feel safe, of course, then it makes sense that you make it your problem and you convince yourself it's my fault because I was doing this or I was doing that because then you convince yourself that you have control over the situation when the truth is you didn't do anything. And again, I don't know every detail, but I'm assuming you didn't do anything to blatantly warrant someone to treat you that way, but you made it your fault because sometimes it's easier to blame ourselves
Mm.
than to sit with the sadness that comes with, holy shit, I thought this person was my best friend and they're looking at me as competition, or they don't have necessarily my best interest at heart, or they're taking all their stuff out on me.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing to do. And again, with Aries energy is loud. Like it's very confident. It's very in your face. You also mentioned your height, like even physically, you're taking
Yeah.
up space, you know? And so in many different ways, again, it's this thing of feeling like, oh, I have to shrink. I have to become small. I have to become digestible. I have to, do different things in order to make everyone else comfortable.
Yeah.
Not your job.
Yeah.
That's their own stuff.
And there's these two like huge dichotomies in my personality because there is the Virgo rising side of me that is prim and proper and quiet and shows up on time and is helpful and resourceful. And then there's the double Aquarius in the fifth house that is eccentric and loud and wants to be a star and is curious and like aloof and neurodivergent and bouncing off the walls. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people aren't prepared for that second version, but especially as I'm getting older, like my body feels different when I'm the true version of myself versus the subdued version.
Right.
Um, to
Even when
go
it
back
comes to
to,
posture.
yeah, your previous question, also around 15, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune illness.
Mm.
It's chronic, but honestly, the past what is it, since 2020 now, the past 5 years or so, it's been completely in remission. And I really
Good.
think it was about cutting out those people that made me internally attack myself, is like quite literally what an autoimmune illness is. So
Mm.
my body does very physically like show me when my energy's off.
Absolutely. Yeah, your body is, and this is what I keep reminding people, and I had to learn this too for myself. I was always told, like, your body holds so much wisdom. And I was like, I don't know what the fuck that means. Like, what are
Yeah.
you trying to tell me? And I was someone who was very disconnected from my body, also for safety reasons. And I had to do a lot of healing in order to feel safe in my body again so that I can receive the guidance my body was giving me
Yeah.
because I was relying on my mind 98% of the time. And unfortunately, my mind would lie to me a lot. And so it was like I never felt safe because I couldn't trust anyone else and I couldn't
Mm.
trust myself because I would see how my mind would create a story for whatever purpose it wanted. And so
Yeah.
getting back in the body is huge. I'm so happy to hear that for you. And I hope you're also giving yourself that time to praise the work that it takes to get
Yeah.
there. It's not easy. None of this is easy.
Yeah.
So last thing before we move on to some other placements, just as a note, when Saturn is in your seventh house, it can also be a marker of settling down later in life, like after 35-ish, or marrying and being with someone who is more mature than you, like significantly older. So those are some things just to consider. But I do want to talk about your Chiron in Scorpio, especially with like the distrust and the betrayal themes. So Chiron is the greatest wound that we come into this lifetime with. That's not meant to put a damper on everything. It is another placement that shows you, hey, this is a weak spot in your chart. If you're willing to face it, to do the work to heal it, you can actually become a teacher of this yourself. So it's
Mm.
another opportunity and an invitation. Now, for
Yeah.
you, your Chiron in Scorpio is in the second house of resources, material wealth. I also like to say net worth and self worth because they're two sides of the same coin. So, wounds around self worth, wounds around intimacy and security.
Mhm.
Scorpio energy is intense. You know, we love Scorpio energy for that reason. It's very deep. So that depth combined with that wound of Chiron can create a lot of intense fears around betrayal, around abandonment, around even emotional loss. And
Mm.
so in the second house, that can look like your self-worth being heavily tied to your material security. So if the money's not right, I'm not right. Like there can be a close bond there or power dynamics within relationships, which again can be unconscious. We don't even realize it's happening. So part of this too, and I wanted to bring it up because it has a square to your moon, your Aquarius moon, which the moon for me is mom. So
Mm.
depending on how mom was, you know, with an Aquarius moon, sometimes the sort of assumption is mom may have been a little aloof with you when, especially when it
Mom's
came.
an Aquarius, so
Okay, well, there you go. That's funny. So when it came to like perhaps mental stimulation, intellectual pursuits, that's great. But when it comes to that emotional vulnerability, learning how to co regulate, self soothe, having a space to feel whatever you're feeling without needing to justify the feeling or having to answer why you're feeling the way that you do may not have been as apparent or available to you. And
mm,
so, again, there may have been a sense of growing up under the energy of emotions can sometimes be inconvenient
mm,
and not sure what to do with them. So we're just going to tuck them away, put them away for later, and focus on what we can make sense of.
yeah,
And because of that relationship with the square, that may have also affected the way that you view yourself when it comes to your self worthiness, when it comes to your um, value, your values. Now, because of this, there may be struggles with feeling worthy of
mm,
love without having to prove yourself.
yeah.
There can
I don't
also,
consciously think that, but I like, yeah, I don't realize that I'm proving myself as
right,
I'm feeling worthy.
right. It happens. It's also sometimes why you may attract intense or manipulative partners because it subconsciously validates whatever belief you have about your self-worth. So
Mm,
again, it's like, oh, let me show you how great I am, how loyal I am, what I can do, how I, even if this shit hits the fan, I'm not going anywhere. Like, I'm here, da da da. But it's like they're also showing you what you're willing to take without considering, oh my gosh, like, I deserve better than this. And I
yeah,
don't need to necessarily prove or earn love. Like, that's just something that is there and within me.
yeah.
And then financial instability with this can also influence your relationship choices. So, again, vulnerability coming up here.
Mm,
Also, detaching your value from material success. I know that's really difficult in our world, but that can help. And then healing through deep emotional intimacy. So, even shadow work with partners or that ability to have those sometimes sticky and scary conversations with the people closest to us. And I know you brought up friendship, and I am a big believer. I mean, my Venus is in Aquarius, but I'm a big believer that friendships, platonic relationships are just as important as romantic relationships. I think we grow up in a society that really puts romantic relationships on a pedestal and kind of emphasizes that over any other relationship. But either way, there's love at the table
yeah,
and there's a lot of opportunity to learn. And sometimes our friendships are the best place to start learning these habits and behaviors and rewiring our system to get comfortable with it
yeah,
before a relationship.
yeah,
Ooh,
yeah.
confirmation burp. Ooh, excuse me.
You're good. A lot of what you're saying definitely resonates. Yeah, I think the sexuality stuff is tough. I grew up very religious, originally Catholic, which I'm definitely don't consider myself that way anymore.
Hmm.
Um, and they put a lot of pressure on the women to be the pious, non-sexual beings, and any sexuality that's like thrown their way by men is often their fault,
Hmm.
uh, which led to experiences of sexual trauma. Um, Even some of the stuff with my friend that I was talking about felt like sexual trauma or like intimate abuse to me. So
Hmm.
there's definitely like a lot of distrust, um, and like deep wounds having to do with that intimacy piece.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up because something else I wanted to talk about for you is your Black Moon Lilith. This is a
Mm,
placement that I love in astrology because it is the shadow, it's your dark feminine. It's also, so it's your repressed desires, what you've sort of put away because it wasn't accepted, it wasn't deemed okay. And it's your power, it's your creativity, it's your desire. It's a lot of beautiful things as well, but unfortunately gets tucked away because it's not allowed. So
mhm.
your Black Moon Lilith is actually in Virgo. So you talking about the sort of like pious, virtuous woman, very pure, very whatever, very much that energy. Now,
Yeah.
because of equal house system that I mentioned, your Black Moon Lilith actually falls in your 12th house of what's hidden. So this is energy that isn't necessarily accessible to you because it's buried deep within the unconscious, and that can look like the perfectionism we talked about earlier, the suppressed desires, and the subconscious fears, and also that control piece. So the lower octave of Virgo craves control, craves precision, wants order, very detailed, can be highly critical, and again struggles with those hidden insecurities.
Mhm.
Now, all of that in the 12th house of what's hidden, this can look like a fear of chaos. So anything outside of your control. This can look like emotional avoidance. This can even look like self sabotaging behavior when it comes to love. And sometimes with perfectionism, especially, we don't think of it as self sabotage because we're like, no, we just want things to be done right and we want to, like, right. Except it creates this narrative, or rather, an excuse where you overthink and overanalyze things to the point where you just don't even do it.
Yeah.
And so that's where the sabotage comes in is you seek for perfection, which is a myth. Perfection isn't real in order to avoid being vulnerable enough to try.
Mhm.
And so with this placement, it can bring up hidden feelings of unworthiness. It can often be masked by that perfectionism. So again, the unworthiness wound coming up, but it's not, hey, you feel unworthy. It's like, no, this isn't right. I got to try this again. This needs to be perfect. Da, da, da. When really underneath that is, oh shit, I'm afraid that I can't do this. Or I'm afraid I don't know how to do this. That's a very vulnerable thing. And
Yeah.
also very human,
Yeah.
a very human thing. And so part of that mixed with the unconscious fears around control, then you may attract people who mirror that. So you may attract controlling partners, partners who make you believe you need to prove your love,
Mhm.
or partners who may criticize you, judge you, or make you believe like you got to fit into this snowflake mold of whatever it is I've desired of you, which is again setting you up to fail because that is what you believe you are required to do and how you view yourself.
Mm.
If it's not this, it's nothing. It's not
Yeah.
worth it.
Yeah.
With the 12th house, too, this is a house of isolation. So when you are feeling judged or criticized, you may retreat a lot and choose to be on your own to sort of
Yeah.
like handle it. Yeah. But again, part of the vulnerability piece of I don't need anyone to see me like this.
Hmm.
It's incredibly vulnerable to be witnessed in those moments,
Yeah.
especially if you have never experienced someone being able to just hold space for you when you're going through things emotionally.
Yeah.
So again, the shadow work around control, guilt, repressed desires. Also, with Black Moon Lilith in your 12th house, that intuition that we talked about, yes. Your spiritual practice,
Yeah.
yes. I also wouldn't be surprised if your dreams were pretty crazy. Do you
Yeah.
dream a lot?
Yeah. I mean, I do dream a lot, and I have had prophetic dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I related to what you said. Like, I've felt very disconnected from my body for a good chunk of my life. But
Mm-hmm.
looking back, especially on like some of the most traumatic moments I've had, I spoke out loud what was about to happen
Mm,
every time something like that happened. But I just like said it like it was a joke. Like one of the men who hurt me worse than anyone else was like walking up to my friend's house and I said, "Why does he look like a villain?" But like
mm,
I always have spoken what's about to occur, even if I don't necessarily feel super connected to my body. And I feel a lot more connected to my body now, but maybe the missing piece was that like my body would have been the alarm that would have let me know, no, you seriously need to get out of this
mm.
situation, as opposed to just like the mental knowing.
Yeah. But also, you did what you thought was best at the time. And it's hard to show up, even if you know or know. Sometimes we just freeze, or
Yeah,
sometimes we do whatever we think we have to do to stay safe again, which is okay, bloop, I'm gonna bounce out of here. Whatever needs to happen is happening. And then again, we shove it down. And so I share that just to release any shame or judgment that you still might be carrying about that. And as a woman, I understand because again, the version of you in that moment did what she thought was best and
hmm,
whatever that was. And if nothing else, as you've just said, you're recognizing like, oh shit, I was picking up on some things. And
yeah,
so instead of being like, well, damn, why didn't I listen? Da, 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 you can take that now and be like, oh, I actually do know what I'm talking about sometimes. Like, let me not just throw that thought away or when I do get those feelings or intuitive hits, it's helping you build self-trust.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, in that way. I'm sorry that happened.
No, it's okay. Like you said, I do also see it as like being able to trust my intuition and seeing in retrospect that my mind and my body know how to protect me.
Mm-hmm. And reconnecting them in whatever way is necessary.
Yeah.
There is some past life karma with that as well, because your south node is in, or I'm sorry, your north node and your south node. You're actually going through your nodal, reverse nodal return right now. Have you heard of that?
Oh wow, no, I knew the nodes were switching, but I didn't know exactly how that would affect me.
Yeah. So basically, right now, the nodes are shifting from Aries and Libra to Pisces and Virgo.
Mm.
North node in Pisces, South node in Virgo. For you, it's the reverse because your natal chart is South node in Pisces, North node in Virgo. So when you have a reverse nodal return, it is, well, first of all, the nodes. South node, past life karma, comfort zone, things you've mastered in other lives or early in this life. North node, the unknown. This is what's calling you in because ultimately, some people talk about like, oh, screw the south node, let's go into north node. No, I don't believe that to be true at all. Everything is finding balance between the two poles. And so these are just another spectrum that you're meant to find balance in. Pisces energy, we talked about a little bit, that Piscean energy, very comfortable for you. This is
Yeah.
something that you've mastered already, which is probably why you tend to gravitate towards that energy. Virgo energy, new place, new stuff, don't know what's going on here. That's why it keeps calling you. But again, trying to find balance here. So for you, during a reverse nodal return, first and foremost, what tends to happen is you're being recognized or you're recognizing the gifts that that south node has to give you. So, what is the Pisces energy that I'm comfortable with that serves me and what
Mhm.
doesn't so that I can like make peace with it, leave it behind? But there is still something that Pisces energy serves that I want to take with me on this journey to my north node. So, depending on what that is for you, it can vary. Your access is between the 12th house and the 6th house. So it feels very much like, which again is coinciding with the overall energy of Virgo Pisces, which is Pisces, otherworldly, the unseen, like the mysteries of the world, very ethereal, very like up here, woo woo.
Collective, yeah.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Virgo energy is like grounding it down, daily habits. How am I taking this energy and creating perhaps like a daily ritual or
Mm.
something that is being implemented through action in my day to day life? So
Okay.
for you, it feels like really moving away from that self sacrificing energy, which is the lower octave of Pisces,
Yeah.
to more structured spiritual growth.
Mm.
So you may have, which you touched on a little bit, experience a lot of energy in this life and previous lives of being sort of like a martyr or the savior, really overextending yourself in order to serve others.
Mm.
But then again, at the cost of losing your boundaries in relationship and
Yeah.
therefore the self abandonment, self betrayal. So that Virgo North node, which is conjunct your Black Moon Lilith, so that shadow is going to help you claim this energy. This is where you develop your discernment, grounding this energy, and also learning how to set healthy emotional boundaries, which
Yeah.
again, when it's new, can sometimes be chaotic because now it's just like, oh my gosh, here's this new energy. And when we're unfamiliar with an energy, we take on the shadow part of it because it's almost like we're overcompensating for it because we get a little insecure because this is new and we don't know what we're doing. And so it can be more ego fueled. But once it's balanced, you can find that sort of sweet spot in the middle of course, I care about these people. Of course, I want to show up for these people. Of course,
Yeah.
I may see beyond this situation and understand what's going on, but not at the cost of my well being and my sanity and what I need to feel safe in a relationship, platonic or otherwise.
Yeah.
So, you're going to want to be careful of dating patterns where you become a caretaker in
Hmm.
some way,
Yeah.
um, or attracting emotionally chaotic partners who are just a
Yeah.
little all over the place, needing to rescue people,
Yeah.
which
I mean, I've
again,
only really had one big one recently that does
mhm,
hit all the boxes that you're talking about. But
yeah.
what was super interesting was, first of all, he was a Pisces, so I was very comfortable in that like soft, merging, romantic energy. Um,
Also,
but
might have been a past life connection
mm,
with your South Node there.
I was very like lured into it, and I don't know if lured is the right word because it was good for a time and it did teach me a lot, but it was like the first time that I was really comfortable with physical touch, like even in my childhood or like outside of romantic relationships, I feel like my body was kind of like wielded against me, like we were talking about.
Hmm.
And so even though this person did end up being super like manipulative and critical and all these other things that really hurt me, where it started out was like it's someone who is holding space for me such that someone can like kiss my forehead and I'm not cringing away from it. And so that was really beautiful in the beginning was like now I've walked away with like even just like self-touch to soothe myself, which I never did
Yeah.
before. But
Yeah.
because of my patterns that you're bringing up, it did take a little longer to walk away than it probably should have.
We're not going to shit on ourselves.
That's true. That's true.
It took as long as it needed to take. I think we're really hard on ourselves when it comes to that kind of stuff. And I always try to remind others and myself, like, when you're ready and you'll do what needs to be done. If you're
Yeah.
not ready, it's not time yet. And so
Yeah.
instead of shaming yourself and like, man, I stayed too long, da 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 da, again,
Yeah.
it's unfair to the version of yourself that didn't know what to do. But
Yeah.
you learned over time. And I love that you're still able to recognize the gifts that are were being given in that interaction, even though it may not have ended in the way that you would have hoped or turned out how you would have liked. You learned something about yourself in that situation.
Yeah.
You, which it sounds like had to do with that physical touch of, oh, I'm capable of receiving love in this way, and not even just capable of receiving it, maybe learning that I want that. This is
Yeah.
something I actually need, that
Yeah.
maybe I have convinced myself again because of other situations or out of safety that I
Mhm.
don't need that. I don't need that physical touch. I don't want, but again, it's, oh, I actually enjoy it when I feel safe with someone. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Sounds like they were a teacher for you with
Yeah.
also what may have come up, which again was probably, it feels like activating that Pisces South node,
Mhm.
especially when it comes to your day to day habits, your sort of rituals, your way of navigating through your day to day, but also recognizing the boundaries that
Yeah.
need to be at play because your Mars is also in Pisces. So, and I want to
Mhm.
talk about that a little bit. I know we're about at time, but because of some of the themes that have been coming up throughout the session, I really wanted to touch on your Pluto and Sagittarius and then your Mars in Pisces because Pluto, death and rebirth, transformation, control, manipulation, all these different things. And then Mars, your personal power, your drive, the way you take action, your self will, also your libido, your sexuality, your masculine energy. And for you, these two square each other. So again, we have a point of friction, and this can look like power struggles. This can look like intense desires. This can look like emotional volatility. And again, this is a learning point. It's teaching you something that's buried deep beneath the surface. So with your Pluto and Sag, this is seeking truth. This is seeking power through expansion, through higher learning, through allowing yourself to experience something beyond what you believe to know.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, Mars in Pisces is really driven through intuition and emotion.
Yeah.
So this tension can create some explosive emotional outbursts or magnetic yet volatile emotional and romantic patterns because it's like it's just the volume's turned up. It's just a little louder than usual.
Yeah.
And so, but sometimes that's what helps us shake out of it. You know,
Yeah.
it's like it all depends on the chart and who you are as a person and whatever else. Some of us, myself included, I have a lot of plutonic influence in my chart. It was super intense
Mhm.
relationships that really were able to shake me out of whatever autopilot programming experiences I was behaving and operating under.
Yeah.
So you may attract partners who sort of challenge your sense of control, not
Mhm.
because now it's an ego battle of who has control, but it's showing you where you're still clinging to control and why. So asking yourself, I keep seeking control here. Why? What is it that is feeling dangerous or threatening? What is
Okay.
reminding me of something? Also, those deep seated fears of betrayal, loss, emotional manipulation. This is coming up with this aspect,
Mm.
as well as the emotional intensity and jealousy that can sometimes come up in relationships. So instead of judging yourself for these things that come up, use it to your benefit and channel it into transformation, creative expression,
Yeah.
allowing yourself to challenge the thoughts that come up in connection to this so that you can really learn to surrender without sacrificing your power. And that's where the boundaries come in. Where am I feeling unsafe? What is my body telling me? What is my intuition telling me? Anger is a great emotion for that. When we feel angry, that is something telling us a boundary was violated. Something is not sitting right with us. But so many of us, especially women, were made to feel like anger is not allowed. Don't
Yeah.
do that. Don't feel that. And so we silence the parts of ourselves that are ringing the alarm and
Yeah.
letting us know. So again, that's just a taste. I will say with your Juno, which is an asteroid in regards to marriage in Libra, for you, partnership really needs balance. And there needs to be harmony. You really admire and seek partnership with someone who understands how important that is, maybe a bit diplomatic,
Mhm.
someone who understands that you have your feelings, they are valid, and I'll make room for that. I too have my perspective, my feelings that are also valid, and creating space for both of those to coexist.
Yeah.
So, I want to check in. How are you feeling? What's coming up? Talk to me.
No, I'm feeling great. I feel like I have a lot to chew on.
It's a lot. Astrology is a lot. Like I always tell people, it's a lot of information. That's why when I do these personals, I always record them as well because I'm like, I know you're probably going to want to take notes. Just sit with me,
Yeah.
listen, and then watch it again, however many times you need to.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's definitely a lot to think about, and I appreciate the ways that you've reflected back that I can use some of these positions to my strength and use them as ways to celebrate myself or like acknowledge where I have learned lessons. So I appreciate that.
Of course, it's all for you. It's all
Yeah.
helping you in some way. So sometimes we just need a little reframe, a little perspective.
Yeah. I have a fun little synchronicity for you. I don't know if I've ever
Yeah.
told this personally, but I know I've never said it publicly. Um,
What?
when I first ever heard from you, and I work in marketing with like spiritual entrepreneurs, so I work with a lot of intuitive people, but I feel like there's only certain people who you really connect with or like, yeah, just resonate with their voice, I guess. When I first heard you speak or do a reading was in 2021 on my birthday at a full moon ceremony for Good Moms Bad Choices.
I love
Trying to
them.
decide when to move to LA, and I had this like picture that I had bought from an LA-based artist, and I had just shipped myself a calendar in the mail, which both of those will come back up. But it was January 28th, and you said, I know someone in this chat is thinking about moving to LA. And like immediately my stomach dropped. And I knew that was for me. So that already was like insane that all those things aligned.
Hmm.
Um, but I wasn't exactly sure of the timing. The calendar arrived in the mail, and the March picture was the LA based piece of art
Oh my gosh.
we had hanging in my room. So it was literally like, you told me to move to LA, and the universe said, on March 8th, bitch. And that was my first time in LA. Like that totally changed my life. So
Oh,
I've so respected your voice and your business ever since. So I'm really grateful to be a part of this.
thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. And also, kudos to you. That was ballsy. That's a ballsy move and it takes a lot of courage to do something like that. And so again, I feel like that story alone is further proof, experiential evidence, as I like to call it, that you are a very brave person. And when you are dealing with hard shit, you can maneuver through it, even if you may have doubts, there may be fears, there may be things outside of your control that can be really
Yeah,
scary. You've shown yourself in different situations how you're able to navigate it. And so sometimes we get so caught up in the shit that we've gone through that it's hard to remember everything we've overcome and everything that we've been able to navigate and how badass we actually are. And
yeah,
how when we get that resonance and we go for it, like we are shown how the universe supports us. So I hope that you never forget that on your journey, on your Saturn return, on whatever comes next. Like you
yeah,
are being guided, you are learning everything at the right time. You are becoming aware of things when you need to become aware of them. And so trust in that and trust in yourself.
yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I mean, I told you. I told you. First of all, I told you that these sessions help us see how so many of us are going through similar issues, especially when it comes to love and dating. But because we don't always talk about it, we don't realize it. And in this series alone, you've seen multiple people come to me, and in their charts, we're seeing a theme when it comes to vulnerability, when it comes to trust, when it comes to intimacy. Now, what I love about Colleen's session is we got some inside perspective on the lasting effects that can happen even with friendship breakups. This isn't something that a lot of us talk about. We focus so much on the romance, but we fail to recognize that sometimes the deepest heartbreaks that can also affect the way we deal with partnerships of any kind are our friendships. And if within a friendship you've experienced deception, betrayal, or anything that broke your heart in some way, it's going to affect your romantic relationships too. Now, if you heard me say a lot of things that you didn't quite understand, but you're curious, make sure to grab my Astros Basics ebook, which is linked below. As always, you can book a personal session with me so I can take a look at your chart and see what comes up. Link down below. And please, please, please show your support by liking, commenting, and subscribing to Shadows of the Heart. And make sure to tune in for our next episode when we see what other shadows are lurking in these singles charts.